Hey, I'm here with Brett Morgan, the Academy Award-nominated director for the upcoming film Chicago 10. Brett, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, tell us a little bit about this film.
Chicago 10 is an animated documentary about the riots at the 1968 Democratic Convention and the ensuing trial that became known as the trial of the Chicago 7. It's a movie that takes place in 1968, but it's really about today. It's scored by Rage Against the Machine, Eminem, Beastie Boys. You're not going to hear any Buffalo Springfield in this film or see any patchouli. There's no talking heads. There's no narrator. It's voiced by Mark Ruffalo, Hank Azaria, Liev Schreiber, Jeffrey Wright, and the late great Roy Scheider. So one of the last roles he did.
Now, why the choice to pair it up with his contemporary music?
Well, because ultimately I was trying to make a film about youth movements. And this happened to be a youth movement in the 1960s, but I wanted it to resonate with people today. And, I think, like, this is ancient history. I mean, it's 40 years ago, you know what I mean? And so I didn't think anyone, your age would really be interested in seeing a film that's 40 years old. So we sort of updated and gave it a more contemporary spin through animation, through music. And, I just didn't think the world's ready. It needs another movie that's a historical documentary about the 60s. I mean, it's so sort of overdone. So this is kind of like this postmodern extravaganza.
Now, why do you think that this movie would resonate with an audience like young viewers today?
Well, I think that ultimately you see a movie about people who are 20 years old on screen, involved in some of the most dramatic conflicts in the last 50 years in this country. And I think that it's kind of inspiring to see the sort of level of commitment that they had at the time. And I think it's a cool film.
How do you think that, the youth today is different than it was back then?
Well, I think you guys are actually more organized and more involved.
Oh, well,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's the other thing is this isn't one of those movies where it's like, look how great we were and how bad you kids are. You're so complacent. I basically was like, that. You know what I mean? It's like, there's been too much of that shit. Well, we just protested one today. Back then, I mean, look, when you see movies about the 60s, it sort of seems like, you get this impression that you open up your front door and there's a protest on your street. and a
big peace sign, too.
Yeah, and a big peace sign. And while there were a lot of protests back then, I think today protests has gone viral. And people are involved in different ways. And I think your generation, can I say our generation? Yeah,
yes,
our generation.
We can say that.
Our generation is probably the most conscious, active generation that this country's ever seen. I mean, look at the people who are coming out to vote in the primaries. I mean, it's in record numbers. And
now, when you started making the film, did you know that it was going to be released at a time where there's going to be so much importance with the presidential campaign and the upcoming election? Was that done purposefully?
No, I thought it was going to be done for 2004 campaign. Oh. It's been a long journey.
So why the decision to name the film Chicago 10 as opposed to Chicago 7?
Well, Chicago the Musical is one of my favorite films, and I was hoping that people would think it was a
recreation of it. Well, kind of. You have the mixture of the different Rage Against the Machine and Eminem.
Yeah, no, it's called Chicago 10 because the trial, no one ever was kind of the Chicago 8, the Chicago 7, the Chicago 8, the Chicago 7, and then it was like the two lawyers both got sentenced to 5 years for contempt of court, and so they kind of went down with the defendant. So I decided to add them in out of respect and rebranded Chicago 10 because this movie really is about appropriation anyways. I mean, I like the idea that we were rebranding it. Essentially, as I said, I took footage from the 60s to make a movie about today. And
do you think that's going to resonate in like 20 years from now?
What?
The movie.
Well, I think this movie will resonate in 20 years? Well,
because it definitely resonates with the political climate today, but do you think that's going to carry over throughout the next decade?
Well, yeah, I hope my movie resonates in 20 years because I just spent 4 or 5 years of my life making it, so I certainly hope it lasts more than a week. But I think this story is a story that people will continuously come back to. I didn't make the final film on this subject. I mean, Steven Spielberg's doing a bit of a remake of it right now, and that will be, the sort of based on Chicago 10. And he's not the last one who's going to do it either. There's going to be another filmmaker, maybe you and your my age will look back at this. And this was the trial of the century. Back when I was younger, they had the O.J. Simpson trial, and they called it the trial of the century. That was not true. This was the trial